Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I miss everyone. I'm glad to see. I can't really see you guys, but I know you're there. So, hi everyone. Hi Joy. I don't know who this is. Okay, so I think I'll just, because of time, I think I'll just start presenting now. Okay. Fortune, please can you stop presenting so that I can present?
Sure, you can.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I was speaking on introduction to back-end development for beginners. So I'll assume I'm speaking to beginners who'd want to start their journey as a back-end developer. So starting my introduction. So the web development, as Anita has already explained, consists of both sides, and not just web development but app Android development consists of two sides, the client side and the server side. The client side is what the users can interact with, what they can see, like Anita just explained, and it runs on the browser. That's the front end part. And then it also consists of the server side, which is the logic system that powers the client side of the application, and it's called the backend. What is backend development? Backend development is the development of server. Just to be clear, backend development it doesn't just happen in web development. It's also like as a backend developer, you build what is called APIs. API stands for application. Okay, I'm going to get there. The application, I'm going to get there anyway. So as a backend developer, you're building APIs for both. You can build APIs for both websites and Android applications. So what is backend development? It is development of server-side logic that powers apps from behind the scenes. Like Anita explained, front end is what you can see, is what a user can interact with. But what happens behind the scenes is back end. And for you to understand what backend development is all about, you need to know what front end does, and all of that. So backend consists of these parts: database, server, and the app. The database stores the data for the app. The server receives requests from the front end. The app runs on the server and listens for requests, gets information from this database, and also sends, let me hide this, and also sends response. Now, how is front end linked to come sorry. Okay. How is front end linked to back end? Front end consists of, like Anita has already explained, there's no need for me to go through that all over again. So front end has to do with JavaScript, or and JavaScript also works for both web development and for both web development and Android development. So you can use JavaScript for web development and by using Node.js for backend, and you can also use JavaScript for backend development by using something called React Native for mobile development. So front end consists of what you can see, like I said, is the client side, and it runs on the user's browser and creates the user interface. And the front end makes requests to the back end. So that's what links the front end with the back end. Like I said, you need to have an understanding of how front end works for you to be a back end developer. Because as a back end developer, you're not working on your own, you're not a standalone man, you're actually working with, you're actually interacting, there's an interaction going on between the front end and you. So I'm going to use an illustration, as you can see on my screen, a shopping mall, for instance. Let's say you go to a shopping mall and you want to buy something. Obviously, that's what you went to the shopping mall for. So you want to buy something and you want to get some items from the shopping mall, and you go to the shopping mall. What do you do first when you go to the shopping mall? You go around, you go to the shopping mall, you if you're going to a website, for instance, you're going to web surf. You're going to surf the website, but now you're a person. You actually go to a shopping mall. You're going to go around the shopping mall. You're going to look for, okay, does this shopping mall have what I came to look for? Let's say you came to buy food items. You check if the shopping mall has those food items you came to look for. Now let's take it to, for instance, let's say you go to a website, and on that website, what you can see is the front end. And let's say this website is an e-commerce website where you can buy items online. And then you go on this website. First thing you do when you go on the website, you check out, okay, what does this website offer me? What can I buy? What items can I buy on this website? That's just what this guy on blue is doing now when he went to the shopping mall. So the next thing he did is he went to the lady at the counter, putting on red with no eyes and nose. He went to the lady at the counter and said, okay, these are the things, items I picked from the shopping mall, and he makes a request to buy these items now from the shopping mall. So just what I'm like, okay, this illustration, like, I'm trying to explain how front end works with back end. So that's what the front end guy, this guy is representing the front end. He's representing the front end as the user. He's making a request to the back end, and the back end is the store itself, is the building itself, the shopping mall building. It's actually the shopping mall itself, while the shopping mall that comprises of all the items is the app. So this guy makes a request to the lady at the counter and says, I want to buy these items he had picked from the counter by making a request. And when he makes this request, the lady will now process and do everything, which is now the lady is the backend developer. The lady will now process, okay, this is what this front end guy wants, this is what this user wants. I'm going to process everything. And then the lady now responds. The lady now lets this guy go with these items. He now responds with these items and gives the guy. That's what the website does. Website will now respond with the data the front end guy made a request for. So with that, the user now gets data from the app and is happy. The customer is happy. He goes back to his house. So that's for that. So the next slide is these requests. How are these requests made? How are these requests carried out in the application? We've said that, okay, how the front end relates with back end is the front end makes requests to the back end, and the back end, which comprises of the three things I mentioned: database, the app, and the server, is going to process this request that's made by the user. And okay, let me read my screen. HTTP is used to structure requests and responses. So these requests that are made are structured using HTTP, what's called HTTP methods. So HTTP is used to structure these requests and responses over the internet. So the client makes a request to the server to access a particular resource on the web located at a URL address. So just like my shopping mall illustration, the customer when the customer went to get something, he went to the shelves. Let's say this shopping mall has shelves and all of that contain the items he's looking for. In a website or in an app, the user will go to the app and will go to, let's say, the pages of the app where these items that he wants to purchase are located. That's like similarity. So okay, so the user does this by we're using a URL address. That's how this user makes requests by using HTTP methods. And now these HTTP methods are referred to as HTTP verbs, and they comprise of four: get, post, put, and delete. So the get method is used to retrieve information from the app. So when the front end makes a request, the front end makes a request to the back end using get request, and the post request stands for creating a resource. The post request stands for updating a resource. So let's, as a backend developer, you want to update a particular data on the site, or let me use the shopping mall as an illustration. Let's say the counter lady or the counter lady who is serving as our backend developer now goes to the store and replaces, let's say, the beverages that are sold in the shopping mall are finished and are exhausted, and she goes to replace the beverage with a new set of items, a new set of beverages. Now that is what a backend developer does by making put requests. He actually goes to update data, and this is usually done by an ID. The backend developer usually updates or gets or by or gets or makes get request by an ID. And for the delete request also, delete, as name sounds, is for removing resources or data from a site or an app. So on to my next slide. What is REST API? So okay, there is a communication. As a backend developer, you're going to be communicating with your server, with the database, with the app, right? You're going to be communicating with the app, the server, and the database. And this communication pattern is what you refer to as API, which is an application program interface. So what is API? API is the code that allows two software programs to communicate with each other and structures how data is exchanged between a database and any software accessing it. So RESTful API is an architectural, sorry for that error there, I should be you, is an architectural style for an API that uses HTTP requests to access and use data. So RESTful API uses what is called CRUD operations. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. Now, this create is likened onto the get request, and the read is likened onto the create is likened onto the post request, the read is likened onto the get request, the update is likened onto the put request, and the delete is likened onto the delete request. So the REST API implements these CRUD operations, right? By creating data, reading data, that's getting data, by and by deleting data, and uses a structure called models. Models are used to define the data sent back as response to the client. So as a backend developer, you're going to be working with REST APIs. You're going to be working with an application program interface. That is what you're going to use. So REST APIs can be built with programming languages like JavaScript, as I mentioned earlier, and Python. And REST APIs are used by sites such as Amazon. Like, Amazon is very popular. It's used by Amazon, Google, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Okay. So how does REST API work? How do REST APIs work? So REST APIs break down transactions. Now, what are transactions? And as a backend developer, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you my code. I built an API with Node.js, and I'm going to show you how these transactions work. So let me just explain this now. So REST APIs break down transactions into series of small modules. For instance, okay, when in an application, let's say this application requires you as a user to be registered before you can access the resources on that application. Let's use an e-commerce website, which is very popular. For instance, an e-commerce website where you go to buy stuff, where you go to buy items. So you go to this e-commerce site, this e-commerce website, and on this e-commerce website, let's say you have to be signed up as a user. You have to create an account as a user. You have to be registered as a user before you can access items or specific resources on that application. So with all those processes are what are called are what is referred to as transactions. So you as a backend developer, you're going to create an account for this user, and you have to ensure the user's account is created before the users can be able to access resources on that application. That is what you do as a backend developer. So you're going to do this, you're going to use REST API. REST APIs now help you to break down these transactions into series of small modules. And each of these module, like, okay, I'm going to create an account for a user, is one module. It's going to be in one particular module on your application, on your API. It's going to be on one module. So another module is going to handle, okay, when this user's account is created, what's next? This user has to log in. So you're going to write the code for, okay, when an authentication, what they call authentication. You're going to make sure this user has to be registered on this app before the user can access resources on the app. So that is what the REST APIs help you to do. And REST APIs can carry this out. This function out by using HTTP verbs, which are the get, the post, the delete, and the put request. And also the REST APIs has various data formats, like what is on the screen: application/JSON, applications like XML, and the rest. So So these are some programming languages. These are some of them. There are a couple of them. You can find online. You can just Google. These are some programming languages and tools for backend development. So PHP, which is a popular scripting backend language. Python, which is majorly used for data-driven sites. Ruby, Java, C Sharp, C++, Node.js, which is what I use, Perl, and Scala. So these are not the only programming languages and tools for backend development. There are a couple of them. So you can just Google and check out which you want to start with and all of that. So before I'm going to show you my code. No, I'm not going yet. I'm going to show you how REST APIs work. So this is before that, let me share the link to this. Okay, sorry. Let me share the link to this. Let me share the link. I don't know what's happening here. Let me share the link to this API. It's on GitHub. So I'm going to share the link in the comment section. So you can play around with it. I'm going to share the link in the comment section. You can play around with it. So yeah, that's it. So this API, this API, it's for store websites. So what this API does is it's going to creates an account for the user. It ensures the user is registered before the user can access resources that are on this on the store website or whatever. So this is for web development actually, and this is for a store website. And this API consists of models, as you can see here. Let me increase the size of my screen. Please, can you see my screen? You can just reply in the comment section if you can see my screen, please. I want to ensure you can see my screen. So can you reply in the comment section if you can see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you. So as I said earlier, as a backend developer, you're going to be working with models, and what models help you do is models help you define or structure your data. That's the data you're rendering to the user. That's to the front end. Like I said, front end makes requests to the backend, and then the backend guy accepts this request and processes and renders to the front end guy information or data. So you as a backend developer, you're going to structure that data that is going to be rendered back to the front end developer, to the front end, sorry, to the front end or the client side. So that's what these models help you to do. So for this application, the application has a product side where it has a product side. So this is the for Node.js, I think for other backend, but for Node.js particularly, because this is Node.js. So for Node.js, models use something called schema. So schema is used to structure how your data is going to look like. So for this product model, I have two models here, the one for the user and the one for the product. For the product model, I have items that are rendered to the user. And here I'm defining that, okay, this item, the item name should be a type of string, the item description should be a type of string, and the category should be within this and all of that. So that's what I defined for the models. Another thing I forgot to mention is in backend development, I mentioned that you make use of a database. So there are various database engines out there. I use MongoDB, so I'm using Mongoose here. I'm using Mongoose for this app, which I require in this app, and all of that. So this is what models do. They just structure how your data will look like. And then okay, so in this my app, I'm defining what happens when the user I'm creating an account for the user. So when the user creates an account, the user has to be I have to in my app, what I'm doing as backend developer is ensuring that the user is logged in. I'll ensure that the user's account is created and the user is logged in before the user can access these product resources on the application. That is what you do as a backend developer. So where I did that is in okay. I broke my app. Like I said, what REST API helps you do is break your app into modules where you can work with different sections separately. So this particular module now is for the user signing up. So when the user signs up, this is what happens. I'm going to get all data. That's the full name, when you're signing up on an app, you'd most likely be required to enter in your full name, your email, your mobile number, your address, your password, most likely your email and your password and your name and other information. So when a user enters in that password, now I as a backend developer, I'm using a get request. I'm going to use sorry a post request to because I'm creating a user. So this is actually a post request here. So this is a post request. So this is a post request. So this is where I'm using my post request. So when the user goes to this particular route, the user is going to be signed up on the application, and then there's something called authentication in an authorization in backend development. I wrote an article on it. I'm also going to share the link before I go. Let me share the link before I go. Okay. I'll just share my let me just share the link here. So in case you have interest in using Node.js in future or as a backend developer, you can actually this article is going to be useful because it's going to explain how you can carry out authentication and authorization for a user. So I'm going to share this here in the comment section. Yeah. So that's it. So back to what I was explaining. So in this app, I also have another module, sorry, that handles the logging in of the user. So when the user signs up, I use an authentication token to and I'll also authenticate the user. That's what authentication stands for. Making sure that this user's email and password is correct, and this user has signed up. Okay, this user has logged in. Now this user has access to the resources on the app. So that's basically what this does. So you can play around with this because I already dropped the link in the comment section. You can also play around with this. But I'm not saying you must use Node.js. I'm just showing you what I use, which is Node.js. Backend development, like I said, the introduction I gave you, that is what happens in all backend languages. That's what happens. But they have different syntaxes, but it's still the same thing. It's basically crude operations and all of that. Okay, so thank you. I think I've come to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions,